Hello, my name is Nicole Miller, and this is my presentation on neurodiversity. So what is neurodiversity? There are a lot of important definitions about neurodiversity that should be clarified before I begin this presentation, starting with the word itself. Neurodiversity is simply the biological fact that every mind is different. Humans are diverse in many different ways, and that includes neurologically, so keep that in mind. The neurodiversity paradigm is the idea that neurodiversity should be seen and respected just as any other form of diversity, such as race, class, or gender. I have a video here that goes into this a little more.
Neurological differences like autism or ADHD are considered to be dysfunctional disorders and disabilities under the medical model of mental health. There's too little attention given to enabling people with neurologically different minds to be accepted for themselves, to discover and celebrate their strengths, and to find a place in society that values their differences. When most of us think of diversity, we think of things like race or sexual orientation, but there's a different kind of diversity you might not know about: neurodiversity. Neurodiversity is the concept that neurological differences among people should be recognized and respected. I believe it's time for this new social movement, the neurodiversity movement, to take off. Neurodiversity is a part of our genetics and of our evolution as a species. The genes for autism and ADHD are not errors, but rather are the result of variations in the human genome that have and will continue to have advantages for society. One of the genes associated with ADHD, the DRD4 gene, is known as the novelty-seeking gene. It arrived on the human evolutionary scene over 10,000 years ago. Genes associated with autism also go back more than 10,000 years. Research suggests that genetic variants linked to autism might have been positively selected during human evolution because they contributed to exceptional memory skills, heightened perception in vision, taste, and smell, a precise eye for detail, and an enhanced understanding of systems such as animal behavior. These characteristics likely remain in the gene pool today because they are still advantageous. As a psychologist advising the parents of differently wired kids, I tell parents they have a choice between trying to change the child to fit the environment and changing the environment to fit the child. There are many different microhabitats and subcultures in our world. For an individual with autism or ADHD, finding success on their own terms may come from discovering the particular niche that fits best, the niche that allows their strengths to shine and their challenges to be minimized. Individuals with ADHD tend to thrive in situations of rapid change, variety, and that reward creativity and out-of-the-box thinking. A career as a comedian, detective, entrepreneur, journalist, actor, EMT technician, or photographer could be. I'm not saying that having autism or ADHD is easy. And I don't mean to downplay the real suffering that can be caused by having a neurodevelopmental condition, disability, or difference. But it's also time the world sees the beauty and value in brain differences. Neurodiversity might be every bit as crucial for the human race as biodiversity is for life in general. My vision is for a neurodiversity tolerant and accepting society where differences are celebrated for the depth and dimension they bring to the human condition. I want children whose brains are wired differently to be encouraged to find their niche instead of changing to fit other people's ideas of normal. Diversity in every sense makes our world a better place, and people who think differently are a huge part of that.
Could I get the 10?
Okay, so that was that video. So let's move on. Let's talk a little bit more about words that relate to neurodiversity. It can be a bit confusing to try and keep up with all of these definitions, but it is important that the definitions remain consistent. So I have some sentences here that should help clarify. The first one. A new study found that some companies are accommodating neurodiversity in their office spaces. Our neurodiverse classroom includes many different types of learners. There are various forms of neurodivergence. Brian understands and embraces the neurodiversity paradigm. Quote, autistics are a neurominority group. My friend Sally is neurodivergent and an advocate for the neurodiversity movement. The neurodiversity movement. So the neurodiversity movement is a social movement about equality, inclusion, and acceptance of neurodivergent individuals in society. And the movement stems from the autism rights movement, but the difference is that the autism rights movement focuses on the lives of autistic people, whereas the neurodiversity movement is much more broad, and it includes things like ADHD, learning disabilities, OCD, and other non-labeled forms of neurodivergence. Self-advocacy is a very important part of both, and you'll notice that the people who speak about the neurodiversity movement most are people who are neurodivergent themselves. And on the right here, we have some autism rights history. The autism rights movement, like I said, paved the way for the neurodiversity movement, and it was organized under the disability rights movement in the 1990s. The Autistic Self-Advocacy Network was founded in 2006, and they encourage standing up to people who talk about autistic people without autistic people. And I have one of their slogans there, nothing about us without us. And so what makes the neurodiversity movement controversial? Here's what the critics of the movement are saying versus what the advocates of the movement are saying. Cultural identity or disability. What critics think. Critics of the neurodiversity paradigm argue that many neurodivergent individuals should be considered as having a disability, and that labeling is necessary for the success of people with disabilities. But the advocates, on the other hand, believe that the word disability does not refer to the individual, but instead to the barriers in society, and that the environment should be more accommodating instead of us trying to fix. Who is neurodiversity for? Critics argue that the paradigm excludes those with higher support needs. Quote unquote, lower functioning individuals' disabilities are too significant for them to fully participate in the movement. But advocates believe that labeling people high functioning versus low functioning is limiting to their success. And every form of neurodivergence should be respected and has a place in the neurodiversity movement. Do neurodivergent individuals still need supports? Critics of the neurodiversity paradigm argue that the paradigm implies that because neurodiversity is a natural variation, neurodivergent individuals would not need support. However, advocates argue that neurodivergence can be both a natural variation and a disability. However, like I said before, disability is not something that is wrong with the person themselves, but instead what is wrong with society. Therefore, society needs to provide the supports necessary for neurodivergent individuals to succeed. What are the implications? The importance of a universal design for learning. Neurodiversity and the universal design go hand in hand. And like I said before, it has to do with creating an environment that is good for everyone instead of trying to fix individual people. So putting in the extra effort to implement UDL will make school a better place for all students, not just neurodivergent ones. Having options is important in learning, and UDL is all about options. It's not making a lesson for each individual, but instead making a lesson that has options and creatively includes everyone. And we learned about that in class. And it's not just about the teachers. Every place, everywhere can take neurodiversity into account. It's not just something that educators have to deal with. All public places can benefit from being educated on the topic and designing spaces so that they're accessible to everyone. Think about what you can do. An example I read was about an event that happened, and the people at the event had these little green, yellow, and red buttons that they would wear. And the green buttons mean I'm open to conversation with anyone, whereas the yellow one is I'm open to conversation with people that I know. Whereas red is I am not open for conversation at all. And that's just a simple tool that could be used in a lot of social public places to create a more accommodating environment for people who are neurodivergent. So now we're going to move on to a talk with Kai Wright about neurodiversity. Hi, Kai.
Hello.
Okay, I'm just gonna pin your video.
Okay.
In the recording, it'll show your face when you answer questions. But I just have to figure out how to do that. Okay, you are pinned. So I'll just go right into it and ask the questions here. So, Kai, what does neurodivergence mean to you? And do you consider And do you consider yourself to be neurodivergent?
I guess to me, neurodivergence just means like it's a kind of self-explanatory term in the sense that I just think of my brain is not normal. It doesn't do what's considered normal things for a brain to do. And it doesn't function and process and absorb the world in the same ways. And I guess I answered your second question as well by saying I do consider myself neurodivergent. Yeah.
Great. Okay, so tell me about what school was and is still like for you. Do you feel as though the resources that you need have been accessible to you?
No, that's such a difficult question because yes and no. Like I've been privileged enough to go to amazing schools. For elementary school, I switched schools a lot early on. And then I settled for fourth through eighth at a Montessori school in Chicago. And incredibly diverse, great teachers, great faculty. It was just like a super amazing community. And I was really blessed to be a part of it. And then I went to a high school that was also an amazing community. It was also amazing programs, downtown Chicago. So I had access to a ton of resources. Anything you could imagine, like anything I could imagine, anything I could have wanted to do. I had to find somebody who would help me, who knew something about something and like could steer me in that direction. And that was just amazing to have. And I recognize not a lot of people have it. But at the same time, school was definitely not easy by any means. It was definitely something that I struggle with and that reflecting back upon it. And even now, because it's something that I'm still dealing with now, like, especially now too, I feel like so many of my classes and the format of them and the way that teachers and professors expect you to turn in work, the type of work that they expect you to be able to complete, it's not always acknowledging and taking and accounting for all these differences that we have. So I think in that way it can be difficult.
Nice. So do you feel as though labeling in regards to neurodivergent individuals is necessary? And only if you're comfortable sharing, do you have a label? And what was the process of being evaluated for that label like with you? I mean, like for you, if you have one.
Oh my God, this is wow. So I think that labels and they play a really important role in just the neurodivergent paradigm. I think as a neurodivergent person, being able to label myself, even if it's only around other people at least, as neurodivergent, even if it's not to go so far as to label myself with the diagnosis that I may have received, or the like official terminology for whatever disability I have. But it's still nice to be able to be like, hey, I have this thing that's different about me. And I kind of see it I and I don't think it's always been like that. And I think that's why it sucks too. And like people have made it suck for me, even though it didn't always suck for me. And now I understand that it doesn't really suck for me, but everybody always like, and society has a habit of doing that, like convincing you that something's wrong with you, convincing you that it is a disability, that it is a disadvantage, so on and so forth. And you like attach that to yourself and you're like, oh, I don't want to label myself as X, Y, and Z. But when you can, and when you do, and you recognize it's not a bad thing, it just is a thing. Like that lady put so eloquently in the video, you can I'm like inspired, and I feel like so, literally, it feels so great. And it feels like a unicorn horn or like a super cape, like something that makes me different and makes me amazing. And I love that. And I actually, my labels specifically, like usually what I tell people is that just like, oh, I've had anxiety or I've struggled with my mental health or struggled with depression and stuff like that because people are familiar with that. And I recently went through an evaluation process, but I didn't understand what it was like before I had been evaluated. Like had an official, real, thorough neuropsychological evaluation. And it's just a whole process that has so many variables. And once you like get that information back, you get a diagnosis from your doctor. And your doctor tells you what the results say. And then they tell you what they think you have according to what those results say. And then so they can tell you like your results can say, oh, you're really sad or you're struggling with your mood or, like you are just generally when you like really fatigued, really lethargic, so on and so forth. Like those symptoms could be related to a million things. So your doctor's trying to like put all the puzzle pieces together and sometimes they don't get it right. And I say that to say like the diagnosis that I received recently, I don't know if it was completely right. And it doesn't feel like it fully fits me. And like that's something that's important too. Patient advocacy, especially as a Black woman and a Black woman struggling with my mental health, is so important because nobody knows what I'm feeling but me. So when I even like, no matter how many tests I take, no matter what you run, like being able to stand in your 10 toes when you know something is wrong with you, especially as a Black woman, is like so important and has helped me so much. So that's what I'm trying to do. But yeah, that was a lot.
Oh, that was great. That was great. Okay, I have two more questions. How important is self-advocacy in the neurodiversity movement?
Well, such a great segue. Self advocacy is everything in the neurodiversity movement. Like I just kind of touched on a little bit, especially as Black women, as women of color, as people of color, as people a part of minority groups, whether that be LGBTQ plus community, like as it's our duty and our responsibility to be able to fight for us because nobody else will, and it's important not only that we fight for ourselves, but that we fight for each other. And I think in fighting for ourselves, we find the courage to fight for each other, as well as in fighting for each other, we find the courage to fight for ourselves. And it's a beautiful like experience to feel that community under something that even more so because like in group, out group, everybody wants to feel like they're around people who are like them, who understand their experiences. But it's a specific experience when you have something about you that in the majority of your society is being labeled as being wrong, is being labeled as literally being like a defect. Like, oh, you got fucking, I'm sorry, can I curse? You got stuck. Literally, like a fucking like paper jam in a printer. Like you're wrong. You're not, anything that we want to be. And that like as a kid and as a teenager, and I'm like just officially stopped being a teenager this year, but as a kid and a teenager and even now, I felt so much like, damn, I'm a defect. Like if I admit and I accept that these things are wrong with me, then that's just no, nobody wants that. But it's not a problem. It's not something that's wrong with me. It just means that I have to adjust the way that I do things. And I can still do things. I just can't do them the way that everybody else might be able to, or the majority of people might be able to. And that's why advocacy is so important because as individuals who have that different experience and that divergent experience, it's important for us to be able to be like, nope, this is what I need. I need the sound off. I need this on. I need, like all of these things. I can't wear those type of pants or I can't have people talking to me this way. Like that is what is the foundation of healthy relationships, healthy everything in a healthy life. And that starts with you on the inside and being able to be like, yes, it's me. Not the peace sign.
Okay, so what advice do you have for neurodivergent individuals who are having a hard time in school and life?
Mm. Can you repeat the last part of the question? I'm sorry.
Yeah. What advice do you have for neurodivergent individuals who are having a hard time in school and in life?
I think my advice would be to focus less on what is wrong with you, because I think that like when we struggle as a person who is neurodivergent, when I have struggled in school and when I have struggled in life, more often than not, it's been because I've looked at a situation and I've been like, well, I can't do this. Well, I can't be what this situation needs me to be. I can't deliver or offer what the situation is demanding of me. So I'm insignificant or I'm not enough. And I think when you approach it and you have that when you approach anything in life and you have that perspective, like you've lost already. I was talking to one of my really good friends about that yesterday. Like, when perspective is everything and everything in life. Like, and want to say that again so we can hear that perspective is everything in absolutely everything in life. Like, how you approach it, how you see it, how you choose to accept it, and what you choose to do as a result of what happens to you is everything. And that determines what your reality looks like. When you have the perspective of, I'm struggling right now. I might not be doing the best at this that I want to be. This might be really, 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 really bad according to what everybody else is telling me. But ultimately, I'm the only one living my life. I'm the only one in this body, in this experience. And I have to figure out what is best for me. I have to figure out what I love to do and what brings me joy and what I'm good at and what I'm not good at and what I want to be better at and all of these different things. And I think if I had to give advice to anybody who was struggling, who was neurodivergent and they were struggling in school or in life, it would be to change your perspective. And I know that sounds hard and that sounds cheesy because everybody's like, "Oh, just be happy." Like, you could just not have ADHD. And it's like, it's not that, but it's be willing to accept you for who you are and be willing to love yourself unconditionally because you deserve that regardless of what's wrong with you or what you have. Like, you deserve to be loved. So be patient with yourself and kind in the same way that you would be with somebody else, because we do that all the time. Like, we're so nice to people and then we're like, "Oh, I suck." Like, but you wouldn't tell your friend they sucked if they were doing the same thing that you were doing. So that would be my advice.
That's great. Thank you so much, Kai. This was amazing.
No, these questions were great.
Yeah, I'm trying to unpin. Okay, there we go. And then I'll just share my screen again. Okay, well, that was Kai. And thank you guys all for listening to this presentation. Feel free to ask me questions via Blackboard. Here's my resources. But yeah, that's it. Thank you guys so much.